Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of Social Distancing the Church. I'm Brandon Lysom, and this episode's going to be a bit different. Instead of my usual hosting and then having a guest, it's just going to be me reflecting on what I've learned in the past few weeks, talking with the guests on what they're learning and how they're doing stuff. And so starting with the tech in this video, the first thing is playing to the strengths of each platform. A lot of guests are deciding their platform and then they'll play to the strengths. Grant recognized in episode 1, he recognized the strength of video calling in that you can have multiple people participate in the service. So you can have one person do the prayer, one person do the scripture reading, another person lead, and it just works a bit smoother because that's what video calling is meant for. Same with episode 4, Bryce recognized that Facebook does interaction well, so he sends everybody over to Facebook, even though they stream in multiple places. So they're playing to the strengths of each platform, which is a really smart way of doing it. And the other thing is lean into what you can do and do it well. Rather than being the next live streaming sensation, churches are thriving by leaning into their identity. Most churches don't have the resources to become the next big live streaming church, but they have other skill set, and so they're leaning into those. So smaller churches tend to use more video calling software for their services, and that's a great approach. And for a lot of churches, leaning into their identity and leaning into what they can do has been really beneficial. In episode 5, Jordan discussed how there was people who had experience in his congregation with professional TV production, so they used that skill set in doing pre-recorded services rather than live streaming. Another big thing is you got to invest into an online presence. And one way you have to invest is hardware. Almost all of church's audio equipment is XLR. Soundboards are XLR, mics are XLR, and computers don't have an XLR port. So in episode 1, Grant discussed quite in depth of their setup, and one thing they got was a USB mixer. It takes XLR inputs and it outputs it as a USB signal, and that is a great way to do it. You can also do USB audio interfaces. They're very similar, and that also works well. The big thing is getting a USB audio interface, so you can plug in a USB or an XLR and it outputs it via USB. And you don't need a big 20 channel USB mixer or USB audio interface, because what you can do is you take it off your soundboard. You take either your master sense or your aux sense, which are commonly used for monitors, and you send that, so you only need 1 or 2 channels. And that's the big thing, is you don't need a huge thing, because USB audio interfaces are about $100. And then your sound techs are working with the equipment they already know, which is the soundboard. And if they've been at that church for a while and you've had the same soundboard for a while, there's a lot of muscle memory as well, which gets beneficial. And so that's one way investing in hardware is really good. A compressor an audio compressor as well benefits a lot. As people talk, they naturally rise and fall. And in a video online, that rising and falling, especially the falling, is a lot more noticeable online than it is in person. So an audio compressor takes those two and kind of condenses them closer together, and that's a big way to invest so that you get a better production quality. But all these gadgets don't mean much if your staff and your team of volunteers don't buy in. You gotta get your team interested in and buying into the idea of online services, and get your team transitioning their ministries into an online format, and think of that as part of their ministry rather than an add-on that they just kind of tack onto the side. A big way, and so it really shows when churches decide to go all in. And a big way I've seen this is when Odum talked about First Alliance's approach in episode 3, where First Alliance views their online service as another campus. So it's not something secondary they do, where it's, oh, we live stream, it's just something we do, but they approach it with the intentionality that the online service is just as important as the people physically present, and the online service is another campus of our service that we minister to. And so that's a great paradigm shift, where you can merge into a hybrid service where you're doing both online and in person. As churches are opening up, they're very much going into a hybrid service. As start thinking about it, how do you keep the online presence long term? Because churches have months now of experience and time of setting up online infrastructure, and you shouldn't be throwing that away once all the restrictions cease. Churches should continue that as another campus, as another ministry they do. That's not secondary, but just as important as the people physically in the building. And one way that you really need to start moving into that way is start thinking like a YouTuber. Start really thinking what works well, what works online, what doesn't. And this hasn't been mentioned much in the podcast, but it's something I've thought about recently. You look at both lots of churches' titles, even myself when I've done Ambrose online chapels, they're very formulaic in that it's the church, the date, and maybe the sermon series. It's those 2 or 3 components as your title. But that's not what people are searching for on YouTube, right? Like, people are asking questions, or they want titles that are more informative. And so it's a mind shift into thinking like a YouTuber in that way, and really thinking it through. Another big one is thumbnails. How do you design a thumbnail for a religious service? I don't have the answer for that. A lot of churches, they don't have bad thumbnails. Like, they've been trendy designs, they've looked good, but they're not quite the thumbnails that thrive on YouTube. And so thinking through that as well, and rethinking all of that design elements, and starting to think like a YouTuber as churches are starting to want to take their stuff to the next level. That's going to be, I think, the next big step in tech, is that paradigm shift. And the last thing I'm going to conclude the tech is, while the tech is really important, it's a tool, not a master. And Terry elaborated on this on episode 2, but we need to make sure that our tech is used as a tool rather than a master. Our liturgies are informed but not dictated by YouTube analytics. And a lot of churches might be at risk now where they are dictated by YouTube analytics, not informed. So we need to keep that in mind as we continue going forward and as churches continue this online services. And that's all I have for the tech portion of this episode. I'll put a link in the description of the theology portion. And also, I would love to get more interaction out of you guys. So you can comment in the comment section, or also follow me on Instagram at podtheology. That would be great. That's where I'll post more of the behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, thank you for joining me.